What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Ramble. Boy, this is an interesting one here. This came across my radar kind of out of nowhere, and it has been really intriguing to me. I think I'm going to finish this, but it's going to be kind of hard to talk about without making this video long, even by my standards, because there's a lot to this. And for a game developed, I think, largely by one person, boy, there's something to this. So this is Death of a Wish, and the best way I can describe it is it's like top-down Dark Souls mixed with Devil May Cry. I guess that's probably the best way to put it. It's got a lot of the systems of a Dark Souls in terms of the sort of back-end stuff and the intrigue and the opaqueness, but it's got the crazy action combat of Devil May Cry. And, well, the first thing you're going to notice, I'm just going to jump in here and show this to you, is the absolute gnarly art style here. The only way I could really describe this art style is like a psychopath's notebook. It's got this very, especially when you get into combat, which I'll show you here, it's as you can see, it's all got this very line drawn, very sketchbook style aesthetic, but it gets really gnarly and noisy and jumbled, and just it puts you on edge just to see it when you get into combat with it. I'm gonna try to show you this here. Like, when you look at this, it's just, oh, like, it's super visceral and crazy. And you can by the way, you can reduce things like the screen shake and things like that if that's something that bothers you. So it does have a few features in that regard, but it's clear that this was the visual style that the developer was going for. And man, it's just, I've never seen anything quite like this before, and it's very striking in that very sort of disheartening kind of way, I guess you'd say, right? And like I said, it's kind of like Dark Souls meets Devil May Cry. There is a story in this. It's quite dark, and you're like the son of this like cult leader, I think, who's trying to, like, it sounds like he's kind of like trying to usurp the position of the devil almost. And you know, you're on a mission to not only destroy him, but his sort of council of elders as well, I guess. And this is a world that has been taken over and is really largely controlled by these dark forces. You know, it's a bleak world, very post-apocalyptic in a lot of ways, almost Mad Maxian in some cases, right? And that's what you sort of have to that's the world that you're sort of navigating. It's very unique. I will say that this developer put out another game back in, I think it was either 2018 or 2019, that not only looks a lot like this, but at least from the trailer seems to be almost the same game. It may not be, but it kind of looks like that, and it's less expensive than this. So if you're unsure about this, that might be a thing to try out first. I'm not sure. There was a demo for this. You'll see in the title that I do at the beginning of the video if that demo's still available or not, though. So there's also a way to try it there. So you sort of saw a little bit about how the combat worked there, right? And it is that thing of, you have certain rest points throughout the map, and when you rest at one, all the nearby enemies respawn except for the bosses, right? But much like Devil May Cry, when you enter certain arenas, the arena is certain parts of the arena will be lopped off until you kill the enemies. Those rooms stay unlocked after you've done it the first time. So if you respawn at a checkpoint and the enemies all respawn, you can run past them if you want. But, you know, you will always have the ability to kill them and get more experience. So you probably might have seen there in the upper right, there is a scoring system. That is sort of the combo and style meter a la Devil May Cry. You know, the more you mix up your tactics in battle and the more moves you use, and the faster you kill enemies and things like that, the higher the score that you'll get. And you'll not only get rankings, but those rankings will actually determine something. So you see there in the upper right, there is a meter there, and when you're around enemies, as you can see right now, when you're in the presence of enemies, it very slowly ticks up. But when you finish off a wave of enemies, depending on your rank, that will go down a certain degree, a certain amount. And all I'll say is, when that hits 100%, a rather large event happens. It is not necessarily game ending, but a very major event happens, and I don't want to talk about that because it's definitely a big spoiler. But needless to say, especially in the early game, it is probably in your interest to keep that down as low as you can. Let's just say that. So that's something you want to keep an eye on. Now, I'm not playing at my absolute best here because I am talking over this live at the same time. But the way this works is, you see the enemies have 2 bars above them, right? So the top one is kind of their shield. You have to break that before you can do any actual damage to them. Now, the way you break that down is different with certain enemies in certain ways, but one of the key ways to do it is by parrying attacks. So I've never been good with parry systems. I just don't have the timing for it. But if you can parry a lot of attacks, you will break them more quickly. And when they're broken, you've seen there, they go red and they're paralyzed temporarily. And that is when you can do the most amount of damage to them. Some enemies you can't damage at all until their shield meter is down. Others, I believe you can do. Yeah, you can do little bits of damage to them. It depends on the enemy quite a bit. Some enemies as well will shoot projectiles like that at you, and you will do the most damage to their shield by reflecting those projectiles back at them, as opposed to parrying their attacks. There, I broke that one there, so you can kind of see what it's going for there. You do have healing abilities as well. That you can use. Now you see in the bottom left there, I'm switching between HP and RW. So HP is literally health pickups that you can get. You'll find them throughout the world. They're in static locations throughout the world, but they do respawn. So if you, again, like when you save at hit a save point, you can go back and pick those up to stack up on them. And there is a skill you can, or a trait you can increase that will increase the maximum amount you can carry of those. Now you may have seen right there, I just used an RW potion, and yes, RW stands for rewind. And what's cool about that is if you can use that before you die, it doesn't heal you per se, but what it does is it takes you back to the beginning of the encounter, and you will have whatever health and stamina and everything else that you had at the beginning of the battle, but you have to do the battle over again. So it gives you, it's literally a second chance to do well in battle. So as opposed to healing, which will give you a health boost in the battle that you're currently facing while it's still going on, a rewind will reset the battle but allow you to get another shot at it basically without dying and going back to the checkpoint and respawning all the enemies. So that's kind of I think that's kind of an interesting system for this. Now in terms of, so I'm gonna let myself die here. So there we go. So what's interesting about this is when you die, you don't lose your souls, if you will, like you would in a Souls game where you have to go back and get them, but you get a big boost to that chaos meter in the upper right corner. That's your death punishment here. But what you do get is every time you kill enemies, you will pick up a certain amount of, you will pick up, you know, if what would normally be souls in a Dark Souls game that can give you the ability to do level ups. Now, the meter that shows you how many level ups you have is buried under my big dumb head there in the bottom right, but that's what allows you to level up. You don't lose those when you die. So if a battle's too tough, you can level up here at the save point. So you have your health ability, you have your charge, which is the equivalent of your stamina, that allows you to do various different things. You also have a familiar in this that I didn't really show you in those battles, so we'll show you that here. Your physical damage, which affects things like guard breaks and resistance. Your mind attacks, which are ephemeral attacks, kind of more magic attacks, if you will. We'll go into that a little bit more. And then you have your sync, which is your familiar's power up. I'm just going to put this into health for the sake of making it easy. But now this is where the game gets wild. So you have two what are called arias here, which are basically fighting styles or magic styles. You can switch between them on the fly using a button, and sometimes there are bonuses for switching an aria right after an attack or during an attack. It will basically give your individual attacks more bonuses. And by having certain pairs equipped, you can get what's called resonances, which you can see here, which basically give them more powerful versions of each other. But you have to learn those combinations as you go. But you can see here there's different kinds. So the ones I have right now are Soul, Phantasma, which is a resonance. Aqua, which as you can see is more of a water-based thing. Pharaoh, which is more of a, it says powered by corruption. It's kind of like fire damage, but not really. And you can change these around if you want, and you can have your sort of resonance one tied in here as well. And then you have familiars. So these are little creatures that fly around with you. They all have their different types of attacks and powers. And by using their powers, you also affect your own, you use your own effectively stamina meter in order to use those. So you've got to be careful with that and make sure you don't overdo it. Each one of these as well, you can equip with these different cards, which changes, applies different buffs to that specific familiar. So you see each one has their own set here, and depending on which cards I have equipped for each familiar, it will change the attributes of that one. So there's a lot of ability here to really customize your stuff and change what you want. So you can really mix and match your attack styles and whatnot here. There's a lot of different ways you can play this game. And that's one of the things people really like about Souls games, right? Is the ability to really build out their character into a very specific way that they either like the most or that they like because it's challenging. So there's a lot to that. You also have what are called virtues, and these are different abilities, usually passive, but you know, sometimes they're tied to particular things. So this one here, adaptive, aria shift right at the end of an attack or dodge for a small damage, and grace boost stacks up to 3 times. So that's one of the things I have equipped here. You know, cathartic for a brief time after taking damage, deal damage to recover lost health. This one in the early game, I personally think is quite important because you can take a lot of damage, and if you get right back in the fight and get really aggressive, you can recover most, if not all of it. That's pretty important. There's also enemy taunts, which I didn't show you yet, but you can see greatly increases the power of Chris. That's your character's next attack. Taunted enemies take more guard damage, and these have different. And marked is that's a particular thing. You kind of get that through story stuff, if you will. And as you can see, these have different amount of virtue points. So you can eventually level up. I have 6 right now. You can level up the maximum amount of virtue points that you have. But again, you can do different combinations of these to figure out what the best layout is for you with the number of virtue points that you have at your disposal. So that's kind of a nice thing here. So you can also, enable or disable tech. Some of these are, you can turn off things like the parry system if you want. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but it's kind of cool. There's a lot of different UIs that you can turn off here, and there are accessibility things / cheat codes, if you will. It's basically like you can see your extra health massively increases player health, decreases corruption rate while in combat, you know, things like that. These are things that make the game notably easier. You know what? I'm not a game journalist. I'm not going to demand that games need to be easy because I'm not good at them. I personally would not use these because I think it's taking away from the designer's vision. But the designer put these in here for people who want / need them, and I'll applaud that. You know, if you don't, just because they're there doesn't mean you have to use them. Your own lack of self-control is not the developer's fault. So, yeah. And then you can see here are the maps. So as you can see, they're all hand-drawn. You can actually see, you know, you can't see it because my big dumb head's in the way, but there's a little, here, I'll show you this here real quick. So you can see here, there's a little thing in the bottom right there where you actually see your character's little signature on it there. So they're really designed to be presented like they're hand-drawn. So it's the commitment to the style in this game is really kind of amazing, and I'm really impressed by it. And that's the thing, right? So here's my confession. I may have said this in videos before. If not, I definitely have said it on Twitch. But when I do play Souls games, if I play them at all, I cheese them. And by what I mean by cheese them is I will usually pick whatever is considered to be the easiest or most overpowered build, because like it or not, FromSoft games are not very well balanced. And part of that is just because of the sheer number of systems they have in place. But there is always an easiest way to play a Dark Souls game. Now, I say easiest, they're never easy, but there is an easiest way to do it. I will usually pick the most overpowered build. I will usually, if I have the ability to summon co-op players or NPCs for boss fights, I will. I am not so prideful that I will go, hey, I only play this with the most difficult classes, or I only do, armorless runs, or I only play this with a Guitar Hero controller. I'm not one of those people, and I'm not one of those people who thinks that you have to play the games in a way that just makes them punishing to enjoy them, So all of this is to say that I am a noob weak sauce when it comes to Souls games. All right, if that's what you think, I ain't gonna stop you from thinking that. It doesn't change anything on my end. But what I like about this game, and by the way, so you've seen me using them here a little bit more. So there's one of my familiar powers right there. This one has kind of a directional laser. And this guy here has kind of a kickback option. There is also the ability for you to hold either your light or heavy attack button to do an extended higher level attack that uses some stamina but deals a lot of damage. I don't find myself using them very often because I personally find that you literally have to hold the button sometimes for a couple of seconds in order for them to work. And I find most of these encounters are too frenetic and too fast for that to really work out in my favor. I find most of the time I'll take damage while waiting for the attack to wind up, and by doing so have the attack canceled as a result. In certain boss fights, they've been certainly useful, and I imagine if you're better at crowd control than I am, they probably are, they probably can be more useful than that. But that's been my experience with them. But they are, again, another thing that's part of your toolbox. You can also taunt enemies like that, which is literally just your character, shouting something at them to sort of throw them off. And it does throw them off a bit, and depending on the virtues that you have equipped, you can do like a lot more damage if they're within your taunt radius, because you can see there is an AoE on it. It doesn't just affect the whole arena. You also saw there as well that virtue of allowing you to fight back your damage is very useful at times, like it was right there. So, that's a good thing as well. And yeah, I've played, I don't know how far into this game I am. It's definitely not, the 40 to 50 hour epic that a Souls game, or God forbid, Elden Ring is. This is an indie title. It's not crazy long, but I don't even think I'm halfway through it yet. And I put a decent amount of time into it. And what I like about this as well is what you could always do in Souls games as well is if a boss was too hard, you could just grind your way to a level of strength to make it easier if you wanted to. Nobody really liked to talk about that because it was considered not, the sort of more vocal elements of the Souls community will always say that your objective should be to get good, and that you are kind of robbing yourself of a true experience by spending 3 hours going back and grinding lower level areas in order to level yourself up higher to make the boss easier, right? I don't know if I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's a perfectly valid way to do it. That was the valid way to play JRPGs for years on end. And I don't necessarily think that that's an unreasonable way to do it. And if you want to do that here, you can. If you really want to just practice on getting good and bashing your head against something until you get good at it, well, you're going to risk your chaos meter getting to 100%. And all I'm going to say is that may not always be your best option. But if you also want to come back and grind out some levels, you can. And it's not like, if you go back to even earlier parts of the game, at least at this point, it's not that the amount of stuff that the enemies give you is so low that there's no point in doing it, because it would take you days to grind out one level. At least at this point in the game, I have been able to go back to old areas and take out, lower level enemies and still earn a pretty decent amount of experience to be able to level up reasonably quick. So that is a valid option if you want to do that. And I appreciate that flexibility is there. You saw where it had the little escaping bar there. So like I said, if you go back to an area that you have been through before, then you have the option to then you have the option to just run through an area. It will make you wait for like that quick second before you're able to exit the area, so that you can't just fully cheese your way out of a really bad encounter. But you have the option. There are some levels as well in this that involve a certain amount of platforming, and there are certain areas that allow you to, where there's sort of these things, they kind of look like lampposts, and you're able to, I'm going to do this here so I can get to another area. They have these things that kind of look, that look sort of like lampposts. Oh yeah, right, I can't go in here yet. And you can actually sort of quick jump between those. And it's pretty cool, actually, because it allows you to, well, there's some platforming sections where you have to do that, but there's also some areas where you have to fight battles, particularly against bosses, when those are around. And it allows you to really quickly jump around the arena and really get the upper hand on your boss, the boss that you're fighting potentially. And I really like that. It sort of encourages you to do some sort of precision platforming while you're fighting the enemy at the same time, which is a really cool mechanic that I quite enjoy. So there, I did lose. So I misspoke before. So when I failed that encounter, I did lose some of my souls or experience, if you will. I didn't lose them all. And you can't recover what you've lost. So when you do lose some of it, it is gone for good, but it's only some. It doesn't punish you completely by making you lose everything that you've worked for if you do that. But you see, my chaos went up quite a bit, and that's something I'm gonna have to figure that out now. I think I might have to grind out some really early game encounters with S rankings in order to tick that down because I've hit 100%. It's a thing. That's all I'll say. It's a thing. But I have to say, this is a Souls-like of sorts that I'm actually really looking forward to finishing. And, well, I can't cheese my way through this one even if I want to, because there's no co-op. There are NPCs you can summon at certain boss fights. They're not that helpful. Has been my experience. So that was kind of the thing there, but I have really enjoyed this so far. It's frenetic. It's like the combat feel in this, I find it quite responsive, but the feel of the encounters in this game, when you just see like the frenetic graphics in this, and the crazy hyper vibrating line art and the sound effects, and the fact that all of the enemies have sound cues on their attacks, so it's, you really need to there's one of the lights I was talking about that you can jump between. So when those are nearer to each other, you can jump around between them really quick, which can make battles like that. Allows you to really quickly dodge enemy attacks and the like. It's a really cool idea that I quite like. But yeah, I have been having a lot of fun with this, and I'm actually really looking forward to finishing this. I think I'm going to really put in the time to sort of get my way through to the end of this, because I do want to see where the crazy story in this goes. And I like the fact that this is not an easy game, not at all. Hardcore Souls and hardcore Souls fans will probably think it's easy comparatively speaking, but this is still a good challenge. Don't get me wrong, but it's a solid challenge, but it's not nearly as hard as those games are. It's not going to make you work quite that hard, and it's going to make you feel just like that. You're going to have the ability to feel like a badass pretty much right out the gate. So this is one of the health essence healing things I told you about. Some of the trees only have one, some have more than that. I don't actually know if I've been to this area before. It's calling it a hidden verse. I'm not sure if I have been. So that's kind of cool. There are secret areas and more challenging areas too that you can get into in certain zones. Like there's a couple of zones where it was easy up to a certain point, and then I went into like a cave I found and went, oh, I stepped into the wrong neighborhood. So it's something that you can it's one of those things where it can pay to backtrack sometimes to learn where things are. So that's cool as well. But Yeah, I've been enjoying this. It's been a very pleasant surprise. I think it's something Souls fans should check out. And even if you're someone who thinks you'd like Souls games but just doesn't have it in you to provide what those games demand of you, maybe check this out, because it's challenging without being nearly as challenging as those are, and it has those accessibility options. So if you get to a point where it's just really too much and you're like, I just can't do this one encounter, you can turn on the ability to make it way easier on yourself if you like. You know, I do appreciate the developer putting that in. Some people, some smaller minded people, are going to say that, you know, it's pandering to the game journal crowd who say that this is too, you know, that these games are too hard and why aren't there easy modes and stuff like that. That's not what it is. Again, your lack of self-control is not the dev's problem. Just because those options are there doesn't mean you have to use them. But at the same time, I will always defend a dev's right to not include those if they don't feel they should be there. You know, it should always be up to them. But yeah, this has been really good, and it's been a very pleasant surprise, and it's something that I think should be getting more love than it is. So definitely check it out, especially if you're a fan of this type of genre. You should already do it, no question. But if you're not sure about it, this might be a good way in. So that is Death of a Wish. It is out now. Like I said, I like it. Give it a look. It's if nothing else, you can definitely say that you've never played something that looks like this before. It's a hell of a thing. And the way that they managed to take this kind of hand-drawn type of art style, animate it in such a crazy, gnarly way, but still make it feel cohesive and responsive. And perhaps most importantly, they made it something that you can understand, even when a crazy, frenetic battle is happening. That's not easy to do. And I think it's quite impressive what they managed to pull off here with that. So thank you guys very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you liked what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. Those do help out a great deal. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, what do you think of this? I know I got a lot of Soulsian fans in my community. If you are one of those, what do you think about this? Does this look too easy for you? Or does it look like a something that's enough of a variation on the formula that you want to give it a crack? I'm curious what people think about that. And what are some other more indie type Souls games that interest you? There's a lot of those coming out these days, and I haven't played most of them, so I'd like to know what people are into on that front. And you can also drop me a follow over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction. As I record this, streams are on hiatus for a little bit, but they will be coming back, and I'm going to be focusing mostly on retro stuff there, which I think is going to be a ton of fun. And we have a great little community there that I'd love to see be a part of. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you on the next Retro Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.